Some forests feel wild. This one feels aware. The moment you cross its threshold, the rules shift. Sounds arrive out of order. Your breath fogs even in summer, and your instincts scream without reason. Campfires collapse in perfect silence. Radios pick up voices that speak your name, slowly, like tasting it. Trees bear scars and patterns, not scratches, and something enormous moves just outside the limits of vision, never rushing, always watching. It doesn't need to hunt. It waits for you to realize you're deep inside its story now, and it's not finished with you yet. The Marble Creek Forest Reserve, nestled in the northern interior of British Columbia, Canada, had long been known among loggers and backcountry enthusiasts for its unsettling silence and nearly impenetrable thickets. The dense woodland had always held an air of mystery, with local indigenous tales warning of a territorial forest guardian that protected the ancient trees from human intrusion. In July of 1997, these legends would resurface with terrifying implications. 5 friends from Vancouver, Tyler Roche, Lucas Breyer, Daniel Kovac, Vince Ortega, and Patrick Lee, had planned their annual wilderness expedition for months. All experienced outdoorsmen in their late 20s, they had specifically chosen Marble Creek for its reputation as one of the last truly untamed areas in the province. The group had spent weeks gathering specialized gear, studying topographical maps, and preparing emergency protocols. What they couldn't prepare for was what lurked beyond the firelight. On their second evening in the backcountry, after hiking 17 kilometers past a dried stream bed, the group established camp in a small clearing. Tyler later recounted that the forest had grown unnaturally quiet as darkness fell. The usual symphony of insects and nightbirds had completely ceased, creating an eerie vacuum of sound that left them all on edge. At approximately 11:42 p.m., according to Tyler's journal entries, the first anomalous sounds began, rhythmic thumping noises that seemed to circle their campsite, like something massive pacing methodically just beyond their field of vision. The group initially dismissed the sounds as a moose or elk passing around a flask of whiskey to calm their nerves. Lucas had suggested they build up the fire higher, while Patrick insisted they secure their food cache more thoroughly in case it was a bear. None of their wilderness experience had prepared them for what happened next. At precisely 1:17 a.m., according to Tyler's watch, chaos erupted with horrifying speed. The tents shredded within seconds, as if torn apart by something possessing immense strength. Vince was dragged screaming into the darkness before anyone could even register what was happening. Tyler recalled seeing a huge, hair-covered figure, nearly 9 feet tall with broad shoulders and incredibly long arms, emerge just long enough to swat Daniel off his feet with a sickening crack that echoed through the clearing. Daniel's neck had snapped instantly from the impact. In the pandemonium that followed, Tyler witnessed Patrick being lifted bodily into the air and thrown against a massive pine trunk with such force that the tree shuddered. Lucas had grabbed a hunting knife and attempted to fight back, but was seized by the ankles and disappeared into the underbrush, leaving behind only a spray of blood and a single boot. Tyler, who had been slightly apart from the others, relieving himself when the attack began, sprinted blindly through the woods in absolute terror. He severely injured his leg on a fallen stump before diving into the hollow trunk of a rotting cedar. He remained there, trembling and barely breathing, until daybreak filtered through the canopy. The entire attack, from first impact to the final scream, had lasted less than 3 minutes. When Tyler finally summoned the courage to return to the campsite with 2 forest rangers he had encountered near the main trail, the scene defied rational explanation. The campsite lay in ruins. Blood trails led in multiple directions. Gear was splintered beyond recognition, and shredded clothing hung from branches. Most disturbing was the complete absence of bodies. Despite an extensive search operation involving tracking dogs and helicopter sweeps, not a single victim was recovered. Provincial authorities officially attributed the incident to a rogue grizzly bear, citing territorial aggression and possible cubs in the vicinity. However, no bear prints were found at the scene, and the tearing patterns on the tents were inconsistent with claw marks. The rangers who first documented the site noted in their report that the damage exhibited unexplained characteristics inconsistent with known predatory behavior. This report was later redacted from official records. Tyler Roche never fully recovered from the psychological trauma of that night. He was later hospitalized for recurring night terrors and developed severe anxiety that prevented him from maintaining employment. He steadfastly refused to go near any forested area and eventually relocated to a coastal apartment in Nova Scotia, where he could always see the open ocean and never trees. In rare interviews granted to cryptozoology researchers, Tyler maintained that what attacked his friends moved with an intelligence and purpose no animal possessed. Local indigenous elders from the region later privately informed investigators that the Marble Creek area had always been considered forbidden territory in their traditions. They explained that the great Sasquatch that guarded those woods was not like others of its kind. It was ancient, territorial, and harbored a specific hatred for human intruders. The area was quietly removed from recreational maps the following year, with official explanations citing environmental restoration projects as the reason for its closure. To this day, Marble Creek remains one of the most compelling and disturbing cases in North American cryptid research, distinguished by both the violence of the encounter and the complete disappearance of 4 healthy adult men in a matter of minutes. The Velinari Mountains, a mysterious range nestled in the heart of Romania, had long been shrouded in local folklore about forest spirits and supernatural guardians. Densely wooded and often cloaked in mist, these ancient peaks harbored deep valleys and unexplored caves that locals treated with traditional reverence. In October of 2004, the mountains added a new mystery to their reputation. The region had been gradually opening to international tourism, with several partially mapped trails attracting adventure seekers from across Europe. The Branu Trail, winding through the thickest sections of coniferous forest, remained one of the least documented paths, marking it as a challenge for experienced hikers seeking authentic wilderness experiences. Claudia Nedelcu, a 29-year-old environmental engineer from the capital city of Orelgrad, had organized an expedition along this trail with 3 friends: Mihai Dumitrescu, a geology professor, Adrian Florescu, a wildlife photographer, and Elena Popescu, a fellow environmental scientist. All 4 were seasoned outdoors people with multiple mountain expeditions on their records. They had meticulously planned their 4-day journey through the remote woodland, equipped with topographical maps, emergency beacons, and sufficient supplies. On their 2nd day on the trail, the group encountered Eric Thomas, an experienced mountaineer and trail guide who had been mapping the lesser-known sections of the Velinari Range for an upcoming guidebook. Eric exchanged brief pleasantries with the group around midday, noting their good spirits and professional equipment. He continued his solo expedition, taking a different fork in the trail that would loop back to the main path by evening. According to Eric's subsequent police statement, the weather had deteriorated rapidly that afternoon, with heavy fog descending into the valley and dramatically reducing visibility. At approximately 6:40 p.m., as dusk was settling over the mountains, Eric heard a series of distinct screams echoing through the misty forest. The first scream, which Eric identified as male, sounded alarmed rather than terrified. The second, also male but higher in pitch, contained unmistakable panic. The third scream belonged to a woman and contained a half-formed word that might have been a name. What followed, the 4th sound, was what Eric described as a howling growl, too deep for a human throat, resonating with an almost subsonic quality. This final sound had caused him to freeze in place, an instinctive reaction he attributed to his years of wilderness experience. Concerned for the hikers he had met earlier, Eric cautiously moved toward the source of the screams, using his headlamp to navigate the increasingly dark forest. Approximately 500 meters from his position, he discovered a torn section of a topographical map caught on a low branch, with what appeared to be blood spots staining its edges. Beyond this point, he noticed a disturbing trail, a set of oddly large footprints, bare and 5-toed, spaced unusually far apart, suggesting whatever made them had been moving at considerable speed up a nearly vertical incline. Eric attempted to follow these tracks, but lost them on a rocky outcropping. As night fully descended, and the temperature dropped, he made the difficult decision to return to the ranger station at the base of the mountain to report what he had heard and found. A search and rescue operation launched the following morning recovered only partial remains of Elena Popescu at the base of a 30-meter cliff. Her injuries were consistent with a significant fall, but the medical examiner noted unusual blunt force trauma that had occurred before the fall itself. Despite an extensive 2-week search involving helicopters, tracking dogs, and volunteer mountaineers, the remaining members of the group were never located. The regional authorities officially attributed the incident to a combination of factors: a possible bear or large predator encounter, disorientation in the fog, and subsequent falls in the treacherous terrain. The case file was closed after 3 months of investigation, with the missing hikers presumed dead. However, Eric remained unconvinced by the official explanation. The footprints he had documented did not match any known wildlife in the region, and the spacing suggested a bipedal creature of considerable height. Local villagers from the small settlement of Verben, situated near the foothills, refused to participate in search efforts past a certain elevation, telling journalists that the mountain was protected by something older than wolves that guarded ancient burial caves. They warned outsiders never to hike after dusk when the shadows moved differently. In the years that followed, a handful of other hikers vanished under similar conditions along various sections of the Branu Trail, prompting park authorities to officially close it in 2009, citing environmental concerns and unstable terrain. Unofficially, local guides referred to that section of the mountain as the Devil's Ladder and refused to take tourists there regardless of the payment offered. Eric Thomas eventually published his planned guidebook to the Velinari Mountains, but conspicuously omitted the Branu Trail entirely. When questioned about this by fellow mountaineers, he simply stated that some places were not meant to be mapped. He never again returned to that particular valley, despite continuing his career as a mountain guide throughout Eastern Europe. Claudia Nedelcu's parents maintained a small memorial at the trailhead for nearly a decade, eventually removing it when vandals repeatedly defaced it with strange symbols that local folklorists recognized as ancient warnings about forest guardians. The Velinari Mountains continued their silent watch, keeping their secrets buried in the misty valleys that few locals would enter as darkness approached. The Cedar Pines Fire Lookout Tower stood as a solitary sentinel in the remote reaches of Wyoming's Carrick Range. Originally constructed in the 1950s as part of the National Fire Monitoring Network, the 3-story wooden structure had been decommissioned in the late 1970s, but remained a popular destination for experienced backcountry skiers and winter hikers seeking shelter during multi-day expeditions. Perched atop a windswept ridge at 8,700 feet elevation, the tower offered panoramic views of the surrounding wilderness and complete isolation from civilization. In February of 1983, this isolation turned ominous. The Carrick Range had long inspired legends among local hunting guides about something that stalked the deepest valleys during harsh winters. Old-timers referred to it as the Winter Walker, cautioning newcomers never to venture beyond certain landmarks during blizzard conditions. These warnings had faded into quaint folklore as modern equipment made backcountry exploration increasingly accessible to weekend adventurers from nearby cities. Michael Banner, a 32-year-old pharmaceutical sales representative from Salt Lake City, had organized a weekend ski expedition to the lookout tower with 3 friends: Susie Dillard, a pediatric nurse, Evan Singh, a software engineer, and Barry Cole, a high school biology teacher. All 4 were experienced winter sports enthusiasts who had completed similar trips in previous years. They had carefully monitored weather forecasts, packed appropriate emergency supplies, and filed a detailed trip plan with the ranger station before setting out on their 12-mile trek to the tower. According to their check-in via radio on the evening of February 17th, the group had successfully reached the lookout tower and established comfortable quarters for their planned 3-night stay. Michael reported that the weather had been clear during their ascent, with excellent snow conditions and no signs of instability in the snowpack. Their second radio check-in the following evening was notably briefer. with Susie mentioning that an unexpected weather system was moving in rapidly from the northwest, bringing heavy snowfall and winds exceeding 40 miles per hour. That was their final communication. When they failed to return on their scheduled date, a search and rescue operation was mobilized, though significantly delayed by the severe blizzard conditions that had persisted for nearly 36 hours. A snowmobile patrol finally reached the Cedar Pines lookout on February 22nd, discovering a scene that raised more questions than answers. The tower had been partially destroyed, with extensive structural damage not consistent with weather alone. The wooden walls bore deep gouges several inches into the solid timber. Windows were shattered inward, as though something had breached the structure. The heavy steel door had been torn from its reinforced hinges and was discovered 20 yards from the building, crumpled as though crushed by immense force. Inside, investigators found a disturbing scene. Blood spatters covered nearly every surface, later confirmed to belong to all 4 group members. Personal gear was violently torn apart, sleeping bags shredded, backpacks destroyed. The wood-burning stove had been dislodged from its stone platform and crushed. Only one set of partial remains, those of Barry Cole, was recovered near the base of the staircase. His injuries described as consistent with extreme compression forces. The other 3 individuals were never found. The most confounding clue came in the form of a single set of tracks leading away from the site, described in the official report as bipedal, approximately 19 inches in length, with a stride exceeding 6 feet. These prints extended for nearly a mile before vanishing into rocky terrain. Initial speculation pointed to a desperate bear attack, a theory quickly dismissed by biologists who confirmed no bear species would be active in that region during February, especially in blizzard conditions. The case was eventually filed as an unsolved wilderness incident, with the presumed cause of death listed as exposure and possible animal predation. Barry Cole's brother, Darren, refused to accept this. After years spent investigating similar events across the northern wilderness, he published a controversial book proposing the group had encountered something living in the deeper range that only comes down in blizzards, an apex predator unknown to science that used storms as cover. His research documented multiple incidents from the past century, sharing key details: winter storms, inexplicable damage, missing individuals, and unusual tracks. The Cedar Pines Lookout Tower was quietly demolished the following year, officially due to safety concerns. However, former ranger Clayton Montgomery later claimed in a local interview that the order came from regional headquarters after several first responders reported hearing strange sounds during recovery efforts and experiencing persistent nightmares afterward. The Carrick Range backcountry was subsequently reclassified with stricter winter access rules, including mandatory locator beacons and limited permits. Local outfitters continue to avoid the former lookout site, especially when snow is in the forecast. Though official maps now show only a clearing where the tower once stood, GPS coordinates for the location circulate on niche forums devoted to unexplained wilderness disappearances, a grim destination for those drawn to the mysteries still buried in the most remote corners of the American wilderness. Mount Abukado, rising 2,123 meters above the northern coast of Hokkaido, Japan, had long maintained a sinister reputation among local villages. The mountain's distinctive twin peaks, often shrouded in dense fog banks that materialized without warning, had been considered sacred and forbidden territory in Ainu tradition for centuries. Provincial records dating back to the Edo period documented numerous disappearances of hunters and foragers who ventured too far up its thickly forested slopes. In January of 2015, the mountain claimed 4 more victims in an incident that would reignite ancient fears among the surrounding communities. A local university alpine club in Japan had selected Mount Abukado for their annual winter training expedition, specifically because of its challenging conditions and relative isolation. The 4-person team consisted of experienced mountaineer and faculty advisor Yusuke Komaya, 42, who had summited peaks throughout the Japanese Alps, senior geology student Haruka Nishino, 22, who specialized in volcanic formations. Engineering major Sota Tanaka, 20, with 3 years of technical climbing experience, and environmental science major Rika Mori, 21, an accomplished ice climber from Nagano Prefecture. The expedition had been meticulously planned over 3 months, with the team conducting thorough equipment checks, weather analysis, and route mapping. Their intended path would take them up the less traveled eastern face, establishing a base camp at 1,400 meters before attempting the summit the following day. According to their filed itinerary with the Hokkaido Mountain Safety Commission, they had prepared for the notoriously unpredictable weather patterns and carried emergency communication equipment, including a satellite phone and GPS tracking devices. The tracking data later recovered showed the team successfully reached their intended base camp location at 3:42 p.m. on January 11th. Professor Komiya had sent a routine check-in message to the University Outdoor Club coordinator, confirming their arrival and reporting excellent, clear conditions with temperatures hovering around -15 degrees Celsius. The message noted they planned to begin their summit attempt at 5 a.m. the following morning. This was the final communication received from the expedition. When the team failed to check in the following evening as scheduled, university officials initiated standard protocols for overdue climbers. The tracking devices showed no movement from the base camp coordinates, raising immediate concerns. A rescue operation was dispatched at first light on January 13th, consisting of regional mountain rescue specialists and members of the Hokkaido Police Mountain Division. What the rescue team discovered at the site defied conventional explanation. The expedition's high-quality, four-season tents had been violently torn open from the outside, with distinctive ripping patterns that rescue team leader Takeshi Yamada described as unlike anything produced by wind or animal. A blood trail extended for approximately 37 meters from the campsite toward a frozen stream, where rescuers made the grim discovery of Haruka Nishino's body, partially submerged beneath the ice. The autopsy report documented severe blunt force trauma to Haruka's chest cavity and cervical vertebrae, with injuries consistent with extreme compressive force rather than a fall or avalanche impact. Most disturbing was the medical examiner's observation that the pattern of injuries suggested she had been forcefully thrown against the frozen surface with tremendous strength. Despite an extensive search operation that continued for 11 days under increasingly hazardous conditions, the bodies of Professor Komiya, Sota, and Rika were never recovered. The search perimeter extended to a 3-kilometer radius from the campsite, but yielded minimal evidence beyond scattered equipment and a single torn backpack discovered wedged high in a tree approximately 20 meters from the ground. A placement that search coordinator Yamada noted was impossible to explain by wind or animal activity. Perhaps most puzzling was the crime scene evidence that contradicted standard wilderness incident patterns. The expedition's food supplies remained completely untouched, eliminating the possibility of a bear or other predator attack motivated by hunger. The snow surrounding the campsite contained unusual impressions described in the official report as resembling human footprints, but measuring approximately 50 centimeters in length, with a stride pattern suggesting a height significantly exceeding human norms. The Hokkaido Prefectural Police officially concluded the incident resulted from a probable wildlife encounter, suggesting a brown bear had been roused from hibernation by unseasonably mild temperatures. This explanation was immediately questioned by wildlife biologists, who noted that no bear species would leave human food untouched during a winter encounter when caloric needs would be extreme. Local Ainu elders from the nearby village of Okushiri privately informed journalists that the incident bore all the hallmarks of an encounter with the Kimun Kamui, a mountain guardian spirit in their tradition that protected sacred peaks from human intrusion. According to hereditary elder Takeshi Nakata, the entity was known to become particularly active during the heart of winter, when the barrier between the physical and spirit worlds thinned in their traditional beliefs. The local University Alpine Club suspended all activities for 6 months following the incident, and permanently removed Mount Avocado from their approved expedition locations. A small memorial shrine erected at the mountain's traditional entrance path bears the names of all 4 victims, though local residents noticed it was repeatedly damaged or dismantled by unknown parties in the months following its installation. The disappearance gained significant attention on Japanese online forums, where many speculated about government suppression of cryptid evidence. The incident remains officially classified as an unsolved wilderness accident, though access to the eastern face of Mount Avocado was quietly restricted the following year under the pretense of environmental conservation efforts. Local tour guides still refuse to approach the mountain during winter months, particularly when the distinctive fog banks begin to form around its twin peaks. The Laguna Quenual Forest Preserve sprawled across the eastern slopes of the Andes in Peru's Cusco region, encompassing over 15,000 hectares of pristine cloud forest and alpine meadows. The preserve had only recently been opened to ecotourism after decades of restricted access, with the Peruvian government establishing carefully managed trails to showcase the region's remarkable biodiversity while protecting its fragile ecosystem. Local Quechua communities had always maintained that certain valleys within the preserve were sacred places where ancient mountain spirits still dwelled, demanding respect from those who entered their domain. In April of 2021, these warnings proved tragically prophetic. Miguel Calderon, a 34-year-old professional trail runner with multiple international ultramarathon victories to his credit, had selected the preserve's newly established Condor Trail for high-altitude training in preparation for the prestigious Andean Ultra Challenge, scheduled for the following month. A native of Lima with a background in environmental engineering, Miguel had developed a reputation not only for his athletic prowess, but also for promoting sustainable tourism in Peru's remote regions. His social media accounts often featured spectacular wilderness photography alongside passionate advocacy for conservation efforts. Having secured the necessary permits and registered his solo training route with park authorities, Miguel embarked on what was intended to be a 6-hour training run along the 32-kilometer trail on April 17th. Weather conditions were optimal according to the meteorological data, clear skies with temperatures ranging from 8 degrees Celsius to 14 degrees Celsius, with minimal wind at the higher elevations. Miguel's extensive experience with high-altitude running and intimate knowledge of Andean terrain made him particularly well-suited for navigating the challenging route, which climbed from 2,800 meters to a maximum elevation of 3,950 meters before descending back to the preserve's eastern entrance. According to the data later recovered from his fitness tracking application, Miguel maintained an impressive pace through the first 24 kilometers, with his heart rate and performance metrics suggesting he was well within his optimized training zone. At 4:43 p.m., he sent his location via WhatsApp to his training partner, Javier Mendoza, along with a brief message noting the exceptional trail conditions and mentioning an unusual silence in the forest that he found both peaceful and slightly unnerving. This was his final communication. When Miguel failed to return to the preserve entrance by his estimated completion time of 7:30 p.m. and subsequently missed his scheduled evening check-in call with his wife, Lucia Vasquez, at around 8:15 p.m., immediate concerns were raised. Preserve rangers initiated preliminary search procedures along the trail route, but diminishing daylight forced a suspension of efforts until the following morning. At first light, search coordinator and local guide Eduardo Quispe discovered Miguel's shredded hydration pack approximately 28 kilometers into the route, near a section where the trail transitioned from dense forest to a small clearing surrounded by moss-covered boulders. The scene bore unmistakable signs of a violent struggle, deep furrows in the earth, as though something heavy had been dragged, broken branches extending up to 3 meters above the ground, and Miguel's high-end smartwatch smashed beyond recognition beside a distinctive boulder formation revered in local tradition as the Sleeping Guardians. The search expanded over the following days, involving national police, mountain rescue specialists, and local volunteers. Despite the use of thermal imaging drones and tracking dogs, Miguel's body was not located until a week later, discovered in a narrow ravine approximately 400 meters from the initial impact site. The forensic examination documented catastrophic injuries inconsistent with a fall or animal attack. His femur had been completely snapped mid-shaft, and his ribcage exhibited extensive compression fractures, suggesting an impact of extraordinary force. The official investigation concluded that Miguel had been the victim of a puma attack, despite several inconsistencies that troubled wildlife biologists consulted during the case. The wounds on the recovered body lacked the distinctive puncture and tearing patterns typically associated with large feline predators. Additionally, pumas rarely attack adult humans, particularly physically fit individuals like Miguel, who posed no easy target. Most puzzling was the complete absence of paw prints or other tracking evidence in the soft soil surrounding the disturbed area. Local Quechua residents from the nearby village of Huaylabamba refused to participate in the search efforts after the first day, with several elders quietly informing journalists that the section of forest where Miguel disappeared had always been avoided by indigenous hunters. They referred to an entity they called El Mono Negro, the black ape, that jealously guarded specific valleys where ancient burial sites were rumored to exist. According to their traditions, the creature walked upright like a man, but possessed the strength of 10, using trees for cover as it stalked those who ventured into its territory. Park authorities implemented several operational changes following the incident, quietly restricting solo hiking permits and requiring all visitors to be accompanied by authorized guides. The section of trail where Miguel had disappeared was rerouted the following season, officially due to terrain instability concerns, though local guides noted the new path carefully avoided the boulder formation and the small valley beyond it. Miguel's widow, Lucia, established a foundation in his memory focused on wilderness safety education, though she expressed private frustrations to close friends regarding the inconsistencies in the official investigation. The preserve's visitor center installed a memorial plaque honoring Miguel's contributions to Peruvian athletics and conservation, carefully omitting specific details about the circumstances of his death. Trail running events in the region experienced a sharp decline in registration following widespread coverage of the incident. The Andean Ultra Challenge route was permanently modified to exclude the Laguna Queñual section entirely, with organizers citing logistical considerations rather than safety concerns. Local tour operators noted that even experienced international hikers specifically requested routes that avoided the eastern section of the preserve where the incident occurred. The case file remains technically open with the regional investigative police, though active investigations ceased after the official cause of death determination. Unedited drone footage from the search operation was never publicly released, with authorities citing privacy concerns for the victim's family, though rumors persisted among search team members about unusual thermal signatures captured in the forest canopy that defied explanation. The Ferndale Woods, nestled in the northeastern corner of Maine, comprised over 5,000 acres of dense mixed forest that had remained largely untouched by commercial development. The private woodland parcel, owned by the Brenner family for 3 generations, stood as a testament to conservation efforts in a region increasingly fragmented by vacation properties and timber harvesting. Local hunters had long shared whispered stories about the deeper sections of these woods, tales of strange sounds after dusk, inexplicable tracks in muddy creek beds, and an overwhelming sense of being watched that drove even experienced outdoorsmen back to their vehicles. In late summer of 2008, these folklore elements would transform into a horrifying reality. Rachel Brenner, a 21-year-old junior studying environmental science, had invited 4 college friends to spend the Labor Day weekend at her family's rustic cabin situated on the edge of the property. The group included Noah Gleason, a pre-med student with a passion for wildlife photography, Terrence Yu, a computer science major and experienced rock climber, Emily Sachs, a sociology student researching rural American folklore, and Olivia Kim, a business major who had joined the trip somewhat reluctantly, preferring urban environments to wilderness settings. The 5 friends arrived at the cabin late Friday afternoon, unloading supplies from Rachel's uncle's aging Jeep Cherokee. According to Rachel's subsequent statements, the group had planned a relaxing weekend of hiking, stargazing, and disconnecting from technology, a final celebration before the demands of the fall semester consumed their time. The weather forecast predicted clear skies and unseasonably warm temperatures, perfect conditions for their planned activities. After settling into the cabin, the group established a fire pit approximately 50 yards from the main structure, in a small clearing that offered an unobstructed view of the night sky. They spent the evening grilling hot dogs, making s'mores, and playing card games while sharing stories around the crackling fire. Noah had brought along his camera equipment, hoping to capture nighttime wildlife photography using motion-activated trail cameras he positioned along the nearby game paths. The second day passed uneventfully, with the group hiking several miles along marked trails to a scenic overlook that Rachel had visited numerous times throughout her childhood. They returned to the cabin shortly before sunset, prepared dinner, and once again gathered around their fire pit as darkness descended upon the forest. According to Rachel's police statement, the evening atmosphere noticeably shifted around 11 p.m. The first anomalous indication came when the group noticed the nocturnal forest had grown unnaturally silent. The usual chorus of insects and distant owl calls completely ceased, creating an unnerving acoustic vacuum. Shortly thereafter, they began hearing rhythmic sounds approximately 60 yards beyond their firelight. Low grunting noises interspersed with the distinctive snap of breaking branches. Thinking it might be a moose or deer, Noah attempted to capture photographs using his long-range lens, but reported seeing only indistinct shadows moving between the trees. As the unidentified noises continued circling their position, the group's initial curiosity transformed into growing apprehension. Terrence suggested they retreat to the cabin, but before they could act on this suggestion, a powerful odor swept over the clearing, described by Rachel as overwhelmingly musky, like wet fur combined with something deeply rotten. Emily nervously joked that perhaps Bigfoot had come to join their marshmallow roast, attempting to lighten the increasingly tense atmosphere. According to Rachel's account, the attack began suddenly and with horrifying efficiency. Noah was the first taken, dragged screaming from his tent shortly after midnight when the group had finally decided to retire. The remaining 4 had barely registered what was happening when Emily was similarly seized from the clearing's edge, her cries abruptly silenced as she disappeared into the thick underbrush. Terrence attempted to reach Rachel's uncle's Jeep, but was intercepted halfway to the vehicle by what Rachel described as an enormous, hair-covered figure moving with impossible speed for something of its size. Olivia, frozen in terror by the fire pit, was simply lifted bodily and carried into the darkness. Rachel, who had been returning from the cabin with a flashlight when the attack began, ran blindly through the forest, eventually finding herself trapped when the vehicle keys remained in Terrence's pocket. She hid beneath the cabin's elevated porch for what she described as the longest night of my life, listening to crashing movements in the surrounding woods and occasional sounds that she hesitated to classify as either animal or human. At first light, Rachel ran 3 miles down the access road to the nearest neighbor, arriving hysterical and suffering from exposure and numerous cuts from her panicked flight through the underbrush. The elderly couple who found her reported that she was barely coherent, repeatedly mentioning the big man in the trees and eyes that reflected red in the darkness. The subsequent investigation by the Maine State Police and County Sheriff's Department documented a scene of extraordinary violence. The campsite was destroyed, the fire circle scattered, sleeping bags shredded, and personal belongings scattered across a wide radius. Blood evidence from all 5 students was identified, though in quantities insufficient to indicate fatal injuries at the scene itself. Most puzzling was a torn backpack discovered hanging from a tree branch approximately 10 feet above ground level, a placement investigating officers noted would have been extremely difficult for a human assailant to accomplish without specialized equipment. Despite an extensive search operation involving cadaver dogs, helicopters, and dozens of volunteers, no bodies were ever recovered. The only additional evidence was a series of unusual tracks discovered in a muddy section approximately 200 yards from the campsite. described in the police report as similar to bare human feet, but measuring nearly 17 inches in length, with an unusually wide ball and heel pattern. The local sheriff's department officially classified the case as a wild animal incident, suggesting a possible black bear attack despite the absence of characteristic bear signs and the extreme rarity of predatory behavior in the regional bear population. The investigation was quietly closed after 6 weeks, with all 4 victims officially listed as presumed deceased. Rachel Brenner withdrew from the university where she was studying in the following semester, suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder and recurring nightmares. She relocated to a small apartment complex in Carson City, Nevada, deliberately choosing one of the most arid environments in the continental United States. According to former classmates who maintained contact, she refused to discuss the incident in detail, but was known to become visibly distressed at the mere sight of densely wooded areas, even in photographs or films. The Brenner family sold the main property the following year to a timber investment company, which clear-cut the entire parcel within 18 months. In the years following the Ferndale Woods incident, the case continued to attract attention from cryptozoologists and amateur investigators, despite official efforts to downplay it. Dr. Allison Mercer, a forensic anthropologist who had consulted unofficially, published a controversial 2012 paper analyzing the footprint evidence. Her findings suggested a bipedal creature weighing approximately 750 pounds, with anatomical features inconsistent with known North American wildlife. Though dismissed by mainstream journals, the paper gained traction in niche publications and online communities. Later on, the property's new owners experienced persistent equipment failures and worker walkouts during logging operations near the former Brenner cabin. Machinery often malfunctioned without explanation, and laborers reported feeling watched. The work only resumed after hazard pay was offered, and out-of-state workers were brought in. Strangely, satellite images later showed the forest regrowing at an unusually rapid rate, far faster than botanists deemed possible in Maine's climate. In 2017, a geological survey team discovered a network of unmapped caves in the remote northwest section of the property, aligning with indigenous references to the sleeping place of the Tall Ones. The survey was abandoned when 3 team members resigned after encountering strange hair samples and what they described as nesting materials. The evidence mysteriously vanished. By 2020, the area had gained a reputation for unexplained activity, depressing real estate values but boosting tourism. Ferndale Creature Weekends became popular, to the dismay of locals. In 2019, Rachel Brenner returned with a documentary crew, but refused to visit the site. Her film, What Waits in Ferndale, was abruptly pulled from a major streaming platform after 3 weeks. No reason was given. Rachel later said that some things ought stay in the woods, even if the woods are gone.